There are two new features that we need to embrace. One is we are in a more shock-prone world. We get surprised by geopolitics, by technology, by climate, and we are not so accustomed to be in that kind of fast-changing environment. And two, we need to recognize that we are in a multipolar world. There are now regions in the world that have picked up. They have economic and geopolitical significance that they didn't have before. I can tell you from where I sit at the IMF, we embrace lovingly all our 191 members. And for a long time, we would do analysis at the country level and then at the global level. And now we recognize that we need to look at these regions. We need to look at the world as it is changing. For example, the Gulf Cooperation Council is a place I visit frequently because of the economic and geopolitical role it has. ASEAN is a part of the world that has shown tremendous dynamism. So the point I want to make is that how many of you have watched the movie The Wizard of Oz? Raise your hand. Wizard of Oz? Very simple. We are not in Kansas anymore.
Dr. Ngozi, weigh in on this for us, because the other piece of this is, despite all of the various things we learned this week and what seemed like a lot of back and forth, and all of the consternation and hand-wringing, the economic numbers and the outlook, for the most part, seems to be remarkably optimistic.
Yes, thank you, Andrew. I know it's hard for people to believe, especially with the tremendous disruptions we are seeing. So sometimes when you quote the numbers, and like Christine said, we have to be careful, numbers we're quoting, but I like to speak based on the numbers I see. People get surprised, but why should you be? Some of the systems that were built over this past 80 years were remarkably well built. And so what is happening is that in spite of all the disruptions, there's some resiliency built into the system. And that's what's showing up, along with other new things that are happening. So for instance, on the trade front, trade has suffered the biggest disruption in 80 years, global trade. There's absolutely no doubt about that. Global trade rules have been undermined. But I think the system has been put together in such a way that is quite strong, and it will take a lot to destroy it. Because we find that when we do the analysis, we haven't changed our methodology. 72% of world trade is still going on WTO terms, and people find that difficult. So the system is resilient. But does that mean that it doesn't have problems? Absolutely not. So I always say I may not agree with the unilateral actions on trade that have been taken, but I certainly agree with some of the diagnoses that things are not going well and things need to change. And that's why the WTO were very keen on reforming. But let me say this, from this week, there's one message. When I came in, I was in another interview, and last year I said chill. When I was asked what should we do with
chill?
Chill.
Last year, last Davos.
Are you still chill?
I said calm, steady nerves this time. Steady nerves, meaning that you don't have to react immediately to all you see. And that's where I share Christine's, let's separate the noise from actually what is happening. You need steady nerves to assess what the situation is and to react. If you react immediately, you may react the wrong way. But let me also then add that what we should learn is that anyone who has too many dependencies, if business people and policymakers leave this place not knowing that they have to manage their dependencies, then they've not taken away a lesson. If we are over-dependent on the US for markets, from the trade front, over-dependent on China for critical supplies, we need to diversify. And I think part of what Mark was saying was that he is trying to diversify Canada in trade, and we are supporting that. Our members should diversify their trade.
But just to follow up on that, do you think this is a forever situation? Meaning there's some view that President Trump has taken a very aggressive approach around tariffs and around allies, and that he will be in office for another 3 years, but that the world could change in the future as a result. And then there's other people who think this is a state of permanence. Some of these divides, some of these tariff issues, some of these issues around supply chains and resilience and other things, some on the good side, some on the bad side. So how do you see that?
I don't think we'll go back to where we were.
You don't?
No. And I think that if I were a business and a policymaker, I would be planning against a world that is not going to go back to where it was. A world that will have built-in uncertainties in it, and therefore I need to plan for how I'm going to be resilient with my business or my country. And I so touch on something Kristalina says, if I was running a country, I'd be trying to strengthen myself and my region. And I'd be looking at my region and then building resilience. So I don't think things will go back, but they will not be as bad as maybe we'll have a slightly better steady state for the future, but I don't believe we are going back.
Can I bring a little bit of historical outlook on that? I agree with Ngozi, but I would add this. We have always traded and we will always trade. Trade is like a river, water. You put obstacle, it goes around it. Yes, it would be different, but there would be always the necessity of Dr. Ngozi to look over world trade.
I don't know if you're clapping for me or for WTO, but whichever it is, we welcome it. I agree. There'll be a call. The multilateral call will be needed.
Let me go to Minister Al-Jadaan. I think one of the other pieces, and they're actually not as big a discussion this week in some ways, though the topic of energy came up repeatedly, but oftentimes in the context of AI. But let me ask you, in the context of geopolitics, what you think of the impact of what's happened with the U.S. and Venezuela, and ultimately what you think it means to the price of oil, and how you see all of that playing itself out.
Thank you very much. And I would like actually to just comment on the earlier discussion very briefly, and then I'll come to the energy market. It was interesting to hear a lot of discussions, including in the last 10 minutes, about we are living in a new world order. And I think it's interesting because we need to define we. And I think I can tell you a lot of we, our region is included, have actually been living in a different world order for decades. So you are just, the West is starting to experience it, and that's why they say we. But we've been living it actually for some time. And if there is, the reason why I mentioned it is, look at those who lived it for decades and how they had to deal with it. And a few examples. I will talk about the Gulf states, but more those who actually even reached the diversification they want is Singapore, Korea, China, and then look at what we are doing in the GCC. So you need to build resilience, and you need really to focus on what you can control. I mean, I agree, isolating the noise, muting the noise is very important, because you just focus on what you can do, whether it is, like Ngozi said, in your own country or in your own region, and build that resilience. Back to the energy, I think Venezuela has been, I think, a founding member of OPEC, and has been producing oil, even though at a lower level.
Very low levels.
Recently, or in the last few years. I'm not an expert in oil, but I can tell you generally, I don't think that you will see any serious impact in the oil market. Any increase will take time and will take significant investments. And the worry that we should really focus on is not just Venezuela. The worry is you need to make sure that your calculation of the energy demand and the energy supply and the price levels at which investments will flow into the oil market will incentivize investors and not damage the world economy. So that fluctuation that we see, and I can tell you, every time there is a suppressed oil price is followed by a serious spike that hurts the global economy. And our role, so as OPEC Plus members, is to try and actually stabilize the market so that we avoid as much as possible, or at least mitigate, reduce this fluctuation.
Albert Bourla, I want to understand the perspective of a multinational CEO in this moment and what you saw happening this week, the conversations that you had with people throughout the week. I'm curious how your job in so many ways has fundamentally shifted.
First, I want to make a comment on if the world will be the same in 3 years or 5 years. And clearly, the world will not be the same as it was, but also is not going to be the same as it is. I think after 3 years, we'll come to something that it is different in several aspects, will be better. I hope that Europe, for example, will be a more dynamic Europe, a more self-sufficient Europe, which is good. I think China will emerge much faster. And I think that some will be worse than before. But that's always the case with the way that
Which
the global
part,
economy...
just so we know? You said the good part, and then you said, what's the bad part?
I think the mistrust that have been developed among nations. I think the fact that the water has to go around multiple obstacles rather than was flowing in a very open space will be the challenges that we have to face.
Let me ask you a different question. One of the things that happened earlier this week is President Trump, when he spoke to us, talked about drug prices. In fact, he spoke about these conversations he was having with President Macron about trying to press France to pay more for drugs and to pay and to press other countries in Europe to pay more as a way for U.S. citizens to pay less. How do you see that playing out? What are the conversations that you're having behind the scenes on that very issue? Yeah.
Health is always in the epicenter of the political debate, so affects a lot politics and geopolitics, right? So it's not a surprise to me. And drug pricing, it is the name of the discussion today. Tomorrow, looks like in the US, the name of the discussion, it is insurance, right? So it is always there. Coming to your first question, how that changes my role as CEO, clearly a lot. I spend way more time in Washington, I spend way more time in Paris, in Germany, trying to discuss. And it's not always easy, but it is way better if you engage into these discussions, because the results are much, much better.
On the issue of drug prices themselves, though, if we were all sitting on this stage 5 years from now, do you believe that European countries are going to pay double, triple what they pay today, and that U.S. Customers are going to be paying 50% or more less than they're paying today?
In Europe, I have seen a tremendous shift towards understanding that they need to build innovation in Europe and they need to pay more for it. I've never seen it before. That will affect the drug prices. I will give you an example. The UK signed a deal with the US government that they will raise the commitment to spend from 0.28% of GDP in innovative medicines to 0.6% of GDP to innovative medicines, which is very close to the US level, within 10 years, so in a transition period, with some commitments and milestones for the next 2 years. I think that's very positive. Right. I had discussions myself with President Macron, I had discussions with other European politicians, and they are extremely interested in not missing the train in the biomedical innovation that is booming, that used to be dominated by the US, with 35% of global clinical trials being in the US, but China is closing the gap. Already 30% of global studies are happening from Chinese companies, up from 5%. And when they see the European numbers, 12% of global studies are happening in Europe, compared to 22 10 years back. So this is an area that clearly will boom health. And why? Because demographics are demanding it. People are living more. People are aging. The need for medical innovation is huge. So the demand will be very big, but also the offer will be such that we have never seen before, because advancements in biology, but more importantly, AI and advancements in technology will allow us to bring medicines that we didn't even dream before. So the question is, who will deliver this innovation? And clearly right now, US and China, with China probably surpassing US in 1 or 2 years, are the two players. And Europe, all the European leaders, they see that and they want to be part of it. And they understand that they need to pay for innovation so that they can develop a biotech ecosystem in the region.
Madam Lagarde?
Yeah, I'd love to echo what Albert said, because I think we have heard quite a lot of European bashing in the last few days. But if anything, it has been good. And we should say thank you to the bashers, because I think it has given us a complete realization of the fact that we have to be more focused, we have to work on those plans B that I was talking about, and we have to focus on innovation, improvement of productivity, and the rest of it. Point number one. Point number two, we are dependent on each other. If you look at AI, which has been much talked about in the last few days, AI is capital intensive, energy intensive, data intensive. And it prospers if there is plenty of all that. If we do not work cooperatively, if we do not define the new rules of the game, there will be less data available to process, there will be less capital flowing back and forth and here and there. And that is not conducive to the prosperity of a sector which is currently leading the game and which is very promising in terms of productivity. So we are in a bind, let's face it. And distinguishing the signal from the noise, I think, is critically important in that respect. The business community understands that. Third and last point. You ask whether there was a complete dissociation. No. I personally, and this might be my emotional side, sorry about that, we women tend to be emotional. I think we have to think of the people. And I have huge trust and affection for the American people. And I know that at the end of the day, the deeply rooted values will prevail. That is my hope, and that is my very, very strong belief. Added to which, and that is something that applies to all of us, we have to be careful about the distribution of wealth, and we have to be careful about the disparity that is getting deeper and bigger. If we don't pay attention to that, we are heading for real trouble. Yeah.
Can I?
Compare it with real estate, which is 12% in the US. Compare it with defense, which is, I think, 4% in the US. So it's tremendous. So by itself, health and the economic activity around it will create significant impact on global growth. But more importantly, health helps all other sectors to be more productive. That's the big benefit of health. And that's why I spoke about the demographic challenges, that particularly in an aging population, the need to have productive workforce that probably will start working more and more, I mean, older and older, I think it is extremely important.
We're going to run out of time, but I have one really final, maybe large philosophical question for this group. And it relates to, I think, something that we have seen play out this week. And it's something, it's a word that's come up a whole bunch of times on this panel, and it's the word about trust. And I think one of the very interesting things that's happened this week is there has been a real debate between the idea of what's long been really the underlying conversation at Davos, which is about creating trust, about creating relationships, about creating loyalty. And on the other side, a view that I think has been espoused here this week, and I think you've seen playing out, that actually maybe all of this has been a veneer. That the world really may very well be about power, that it may be about leverage, that when people in this room go to have different meetings with other people or go to parties or this or that, they go in part because they're trying to gain some kind of leverage over somebody else, and that we are living in some kind of world that that's what it is, but that for for a long time, we haven't talked about it that way. I think that's actually, to some degree, how some parts of the administration of the United States even think about these power dynamics. And I'm curious, sort of, if you could just, from a philosophical perspective, speak to this very issue, because I think underneath all of it, that's what this is about. This is about what relationships and loyalty mean, and whether that's real, or whether there's something else that's always been at play, and we're now just seeing it in a different way. Who wants to take that?
Could start if you want. I'll tell you two things. One is, it is and has been since, I don't know, God created this earth, a power grab. So it's, I mean, you cannot hide from this. I mean, it has been always like this. Civilizations obviously moved, developed, were more rational, and empathy and group work became more valuable, even to the powerful. In today's world, I can tell you the fact, just simplifying it, the fact that 3,000 leaders flew into this very difficult weather village, or took the train to come here, says something that actually even the most powerful needed to come here and seek dialogue, because there are areas where they just cannot resolve it in their own, no matter how powerful they are. And I think the whole idea today is we need to make sure that we bring more about that dialogue, that cooperation, embracing forums like this, embracing the World Bank, embracing the IMF, which, despite all the noise again, IMF and the World Bank are being embraced today stronger than what it was before. Because uncertainty requires these kinds of institutions to provide support. I'll stop there.
Yep. I want to second what Minister Al-Jadaan just said. I think trust and truth go well together. And what I take away from this week is that we have a duty of truth. We, as institutions that provide numbers, that provide analysis of what is happening, hence my signals versus the noise, and this is how we can maintain trust. Second observation, it takes time to build trust. It doesn't take much time to erode it. I think trust has been eroded a little bit, maybe a lot, but our duty in the spirit of dialogue is definitely to rebuild what could have been eroded. Thank you.
On that note, let me thank this extraordinary panel for a remarkable conversation. Thank you very, very much. Please stay where you are for just a moment, because I'd like to introduce Faisal Al-Ibrahim. He's the Minister of Economy and Planning of Saudi Arabia to the stage to deliver some brief remarks about something special that is coming up very, very soon.
Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'd like to first start by thanking Larry, Andre, and Borge and the Forum team for putting together a remarkable week, to say the least. As we reflect on the global outlook, uncertainty has weighed heavily on expectations. Expectations about growth, inflation, debt, trade, investment, and of course, geopolitical risk. Yet the reality has been more resilient than expected. Despite uncertainty, the global economy has endured, adjusted, and continued to move forward. But what is clear, and perhaps clearer this year than ever before, is what has surfaced as we have tried, often repeatedly, to tackle these challenges. Pragmatism has become scarce. Trust has become increasingly transactional. Collaboration is narrowing and, in fact, sometimes losing momentum. And too often voices speak, but fewer are truly heard. And if we think about it, if we think about stability, stability can't be quickly built, and it can't be bought. Stability needs to be founded, nurtured, protected, reinforced, and guided. Stability is non-negotiable. When trust and collaboration are genuine, they compound over time, reinforcing one another so that progress holds when circumstances change. This is where the focus must shift. Like our colleague said, not towards the status quo, but towards the ingredients that make collaboration actually count. Being pragmatic and thinking long-term, with the discipline to follow through beyond intent and ambition, and the persistence to remain engaged even when views diverge, especially when views diverge. No single convening, no matter how well-intentioned, will resolve every global challenge. But each time there's an opportunity for all of us to be resolute and deeply invested, and for us to build the culture that allows cooperation to function in the first place. A culture that nurtures strength and progress and unlocks the potential of the global economy in all its diversity. Every country, every region, and every economy. To stand shoulder to shoulder and confront complexity, work through it, rather than force or accept artificial convergence or watered down consensus. When confronted with uncertainty, our late founding king, King Abdulaziz, once said, "Al-Quwwa al-Quwwa la barakallah bil-dha'f," which captured a simple yet powerful idea. Facing challenges requires strength and confidence to move forward, especially when conditions are difficult. For there is no virtue in weakness. We cannot sit idle and wait for decisive moments. We cannot keep talking about multiple futures. What future do we want to see? And what are we going to do to get there, seriously and repetitively? As much as we want to believe this boxing match will end with a knockout blow, reality keeps reminding us and teaching us that this is the full 12 rounds. And it is in this spirit that I'm honored to extend an invitation to you to join us in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, for the World Economic Forum Global Collaboration and Growth Meeting this April, under the patronage of His Royal Highness, Crown Prince and Prime Minister Mohammed bin Salman. This forms part of an ongoing effort that builds on the momentum of the World Economic Forum special meeting held in Riyadh, and more importantly, on the platform Saudi Arabia has become, a global capital of pragmatism and of consequence. At a time when the global economy is confronting long-standing structural challenges, this effort helps move cooperation from intent to outcome by setting clear expectations, anchoring responsibilities, and ultimately making dialogue count. See you all in Jeddah. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. It has been a remarkable week, and we owe an enormous thanks to all of the folks who work at the World Economic Forum. But right now it is my privilege to introduce Borge. Of course, he is the President and CEO of the World Economic Forum, to the stage for some final remarks for this remarkable week. Please.